We're back. Love those guys.
Yeah,
Uh,
good folk.
so we talked earlier about Bolsonaro, Bolsonaro,
Eduardo.
Eduardo, Eduardo's dad. We talked about Eduardo's dad and how he's basically saying, we're going to try to steal the election. Lula's winning. We should have mentioned Lula's winning in polls by like something like 50 to 25%. Probably going to win in the first round if there's not a military coup. But it's not just the right. And I said anti-left parties sort of foreclosing on democracy and putting their fingers on the scales. We have a situation in Buffalo, David, that you're going to enlighten us about.
Yeah, we have a situation in Buffalo and also in Seattle that
Right.
we want to highlight, which are examples of a couple things. One, that centrists and liberals would never, ever try to do something like this to knock out a Republican. They are more deathly afraid of socialists coming into power and actually being able to deliver things for people than they are of the right wing. And this is a horrific example of it in Buffalo. And I wanted to note this. People are probably familiar. India Walton, Democratic Socialist, wins a historical election in the Democratic primary in Buffalo, right? And that's one of those areas where you win the Democratic primary and you're very likely to be the candidate. Well, despite that historic victory and the voters' will being very clear, the city council there is actually trying to undermine her. If you could just scroll down a little bit, this is a piece in Truth Out. Democratic Socialist India Walton's groundbreaking victory in the mayoral primary of Buffalo, New York, was destined to earn the ire of the local powers that be. Longtime Democratic fixture and top ally of Governor Andrew Cuomo, now disgraced, Mayor Brian Brown, was caught off guard and ousted in a startling upheaval, and Walton will now run unopposed by any Republican candidate in November. Walton's win is enormously disruptive to entrenched power, leaving the business community and the political establishment around with their hair on fire, as Jeff Kelly vividly put in The Nation. Walton's social democratic agenda includes police accountability, affordable housing, public banking of particular note in a city marred by the legacy of industrial manufacturing, a climate action plan. Her plan as will likely meet significant resistance from not only reactionary conservative unions, police, and capital, but also from her former opponent in the primary. And as some developments indicate, the same Democratic power brokers who have outwardly pledged Walton their support. And it goes on to state that there's basically a full-on campaign right now to eradicate the position of mayor in the city of Buffalo. Which is just a very clear slap in the face to the voters. This is not about promoting democracy. This is not about promoting efficiency. This is about trying to pull the election away from somebody who won fair and square against the entrenched political class that is now trying to use their power to undermine her.
Yeah, and so like running the guy she beat in the primary, trying to run on the ballot, but also there's these things that look a lot like what sort of like I think the North Carolina Republican Party started doing after a Democrat won the governor, which is just remove powers from the office that they won.
Essentially, that's what they're trying to do, is to strip the mayoral position into a position that is essentially, symbolic.
Right, and
And
it's
not
and it's done so in this very. I'm trying to see if I can find it here, but basically, it's saying that the mayor system. It's now time to dispense with it because it led to underinvestment in certain communities. India
Oh my
Walton,
God.
like we shouldn't have to say this, as a socialist, ran on investing in those communities, right? Like the idea that you would, oh, now let's do it after all this time. It's a completely cynical use of those sorts of issues.
And not just ran in the a class focused kind of way, but a class rooted way. India Walton should be known as a black woman, a working class member of her community, and that's why she was able to get out the vote to defeat this machine in the first place, right? So any of that kind of talk is extremely cynical, but that's a good point, Matt, because not only is this a kind of general attack on democracy itself, but this is the really cynical way that those in power have been trying to use, discourses that have developed to try to fight for acknowledgement and liberation for people, to try to undermine the very forces of power sharing that are needed if you are very serious about serving, marginalized communities, etc., as they would say.
Yeah, here's what the council member said. Why justify the inquiry? This is an inquiry into, getting rid of certain powers from the mayor and devolving them onto the council. Justified the inquiry on the grounds that the mayoralty system had resulted in disinvestment in poor neighborhoods. That rationale is particularly incoherent given that the presumptive mayor, whom Wyatt pointedly neglected to mention, is a socialist whose platform includes specific promises to increase investment in poor areas. Yeah, I mean, utterly despicable. And again, there's no difference to me what these sort of centrist Democrats do and what Republicans do. And we know this from the centrist newspaper of record, the New York Times. If you look, there's an article that says that actually the most anti-democratic group of people is the centrists.
Yeah. And look, the advantage is that she's going to win. She'll be in power, and she will have the ability to, to use that office before they are able to even bring something like that to a ballot, to be able to strip her of those powers. So she'll be able to do what socialists do, which is govern effectively. And it's one of those things that, working class politicians tend to stay in office for a very long time because they actually deliver for their people.
One more note, just infuriated me, was the way that the local press is laundering attacks from, say, like landlords that are completely unsubstantiated about India Walton and implying sort of like criminality and stuff like that. Just what's happening in Buffalo is completely despicable. India Walton needs people's support.
Yes. And keep your eyes on it. And another thing that I want people to keep their eyes on, and I'll put it in the show notes. I didn't have it up with me, but there are ways to continue to support this campaign, is Kshama Sawant, who's been showing a different way of doing politics and has been extremely effective at not only delivering for people, but helping us imagine what politics can be when socialists are in power, right? So not just doing the traditional things that people in office do, right, which is like proposing legislation, voting on things like that, but actually using the position as a center for working class organizing, which Kshama Sawant has done with her socialist city council office. And a really cynical group, and this is not the first time she's been up against this, but another really cynical group is out there trying to get a recall campaign against Sawant. So remember, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but when she goes up in an election cycle, she is underwater with outside money, basically trying to undermine her time and time again. The sources of the money are very clearly entrenched local business elites, and most notably people like Jeff Bezos, who has been against Kshama Sawant from the get-go. And again, this is why Kshama Sawant and this movement has been so inspiring. That a city councilor is giving somebody like Bezos so much grief shows what working class politics can really do. And there's been a recall campaign against her. And they've been out collecting signatures for a while, not always through the most transparent means, but they're basically trying to undermine her. So they can't beat her at the ballot box, right? They can't beat her in the elections. So they're trying to get a second recall election where they can just, get a bunch of white suburban wine moms, local business elites worked up about this very scary socialist in the neighborhood, right? But Kshama Sawant has done something. If you pull up this Jacobin article, that I just love the guts of this, but I think it really exposes what this campaign is. I mean, this is a piece that was in Jacobin a couple weeks ago by Kshama Sawant, why I signed the petition for my own recall. And this piece, people should give it a read because she sort of goes through what has happened while she's been in office. But I don't need to read from, you can just pull it down. She's shown what they've done in office, but basically exposes the strategy of the recall campaign. And the strategy, just like they've done in cities like Austin and cities all across the country, is these right-wing funded movements. Their biggest fear is going up in a populated election, right? An election where a lot of people show up to vote. They much prefer to vote in, out of season, off year elections, where the electorate is wider and wealthier, and more conservative. So they've been pushing this recall campaign against her. They have to get so many signatures. And Kshama Sawant and her team noticed that they had really slowed down in their collection of signatures recently. And that was because a filing deadline was coming. And if they were to get to turn in those signatures now, that would mean that the election would be held this November. Instead, what they're trying to do is they're trying to, basically slow down their collection of signatures so that they can say, oh, we weren't able to get them in time, blah, blah, and then turn them in so that they can have the election this next summer, where again, the electorate will be more conservative and wealthier than a typical, general election. So what Kshama Sawant and her team did was they signed the petition themselves, and they sent out their people all across the city to get people to sign signatures and to sign the recall election against Kshama Sawant. And it should be noted too, they collected an incredible amount of signatures, which should just show the strength and the community roots that this organization already has.
So yeah, like, I mean,
And
I got this story here. But
if you want to give them an update.
Yeah, like, where are we now? Because I mean, that is an amazing flex. And
I just love the tactics, right? And this is how you do like bold and courageous and creative politics, and leverage the power and position that you have. Yeah, but this I can go through it. What's next for Kshama Sawant with November vote no longer likely, right? With the likelihood of a recall vote for Kshama Sawant taking place in November quickly dwindling, several questions remain as to what comes next. That includes uncertainty surrounding signatures gathering efforts, when a vote is most likely to take place, and where the efforts currently stand, right? Signatures are due mid-October. And they're basically saying that they don't think they can do it, despite the fact that it seems like Kshama Sawant and her team have collected enough signatures. But they said something along the lines of the person behind the recall campaign. They said that they want to do it on their own schedule and on the voters' schedule, and not on the schedule of Kshama Sawant and her team, which is just them again. Showing that this is not a democratic referendum. This is not about trying to get the voice of the people and say, okay, we're going to rise up against an unpopular candidate. No, this is them trying to cynically use the tools that they have at their disposal and the legal opportunities that they have to undermine a democratically elected socialist who's been doing a hell of a lot for the people of Seattle.
And just this is a wide thing. It's not just socialists, but also just reform DAs.
Yeah, that's true.
Original recall Chesa Boudin effort fails to get enough signatures, but it's this pro-carceral, big city corporate liberal, basically, right? Big money urban liberals are going to be increasingly a problem.
And let's not forget too that the crime starts way before it goes to the ballot. What these people are trying to do, and they've been trying to do with Kshama Sawant from the get-go, is trying to slow her down, right? Because if you're constantly having to push back these kind of nonsensical attacks on your position, despite the fact that you are able to flex yourself as a movement and defeat them time and time again, you're spending resources, time, energy, attention constantly fighting against people who are trying to undermine democracy. And that's all that it is. They're trying to undermine democracy because people like Kshama Sawant are doing something very different with their power than most politicians do. As Danny Bessner was saying earlier, most people, you vote, and like the idea is that, you basically get to choose between two pre-selected members of the ruling class, right? And this kind of politics is very different. It's taking advantage of that system and trying to find ways to squeeze working class power, right? They don't want that to happen. So they're trying to do everything that they can, one, to pull people out of power, and two, to make it so difficult for them to just do the basic aspects of the position that they're elected in.
Right. Like, it's great that Kshama met this in such a way, and had the power and the sort of volunteer army to go collect signatures. They could have also been doing something positive. Yeah. And not defensive.
And, I mean, they're continuing to do positive stuff. I don't want to make it seem like absolutely they're not doing it, but I mean, look at all the stuff that they've been doing in the past 6 months, and imagine what they would be able to do if they weren't also having to focus a lot of their energy making sure that they don't have the position robbed from them in some kind of anti-democratic stuff.
Precisely.
So, the thing is, like, the threats to democracy, despite what Mike Lindell and Trump think, are not the machines or the secret packets or whatever. It's rich people.
Yeah.
And it's been that way for a very long damn time.
Yeah, exactly.